This is a Facebook Live with Andrew Nolan. We're trying to have conversations regarding the raising of men's consciousness in our society. We men had a bit of a history, and hopefully he won't be too far away from joining us. Hello, Andrew. Yep. Hello, Debbie Russell. Good to see you. Sorry, just waiting on Andrew. I probably need to put glasses on. Oh, that's an old sign, isn't it? That getting very old in the old age, that I need to wear glasses. Hello, Debbie. Good to see you. I'm going to wave to you and just have a conversation. Yeah, if you've got any questions, hello, Vicky. Great to see you too. We're about to, Andrew and I are going to have our conversations on raising men's consciousness. If you've got any questions, please feel free to pose them. Last week we had conversations. Yep, wants to be in your video. That's good. Approve. Here we go. Yeah, Vicky, we'd be grateful of your feedback too, to really improve. Hello, mate.
G'day, Mark. How you doing?
Yeah, good. I can now take the goggles off.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, good. You know, you've had a day in Tasmania doing symbols and sound play training.
I have. It's been great. Focusing on personal journey work today and just getting back into, just some of the practice with sound play and symbol work.
Do you want to give a bit of a quick synopsis on symbols and sound play work? I found it really powerful in our training, and it goes quite deep just through the use of symbols. And I guess a lot of our inner journey work is metaphoric. It's hard to put words to it.
Yeah, so sound play, for those that don't know, I might just talk about the equipment first and then explain how it all works. It's a therapeutic process whereby a box containing sand is used. You can shape and move the sand, and figurines, miniatures, which we refer to as symbols, are then placed into the sand. It's an excellent way of communicating stories, experiences, feelings. It's a fantastic way of expressing things that we might otherwise find hard to put into words.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm just going to start recording the conversation, mate.
Yeah, great.
Okay, we're on. It's now being recorded. And it's really interesting. Last week we were having a conversation about, again, about men and vulnerability, and I used a terminology called, we've got Chris Chaplin from Rome watching. Hello, Chris. It's lovely to see you. And I was just with Carol today, and she's heading over to Rome to see Chris and spend a couple of weeks with him in Rome. So that's really lovely. We were talking about vulnerability last week, and I used that terminology, divine fragility, and my sense is we both really non-verbally resonated with that terminology. Would that be a fair depiction or a fair sense of what happened in the conversation last week?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Which leads into tonight's conversation about how much of the conversations, intimate conversation and connections we have with people, how much of it's verbal and how much of it's non-verbal. And I guess where we're, as two men last week, we were engaging and connecting, my sense of it in a non-verbal level. E.g., we use the word resonating, and yeah, how much of our conversations is non-verbal. And I went to Dr. Google, and if I can get a quote for you from, I just need to look away to. A University of Pennsylvania study reported that the majority of communication is transmitted non-verbally. 70% of communication is body language, 23% is voice tone and inflection, and only 7% is spoken word. The goal is to have your non-verbal message match your verbal message. Now, I'm just wondering, how does that then sit a lot for us men when my experience in dealing, being a male, is a lot of our communication, and we do need to, is logical and rational. It's very intellectual.
Yeah, that's where my thoughts were headed as you were talking, Mark. If we are purely rational in our thinking, then when we're listening to people talk, we're going to focus really almost exclusively on the words. And if those statistics are true, there's a risk to that. The risk being that we might not get we may not be getting the full picture.
And so we'd be missing that picture because we're up in our heads?
That's right. And so if we're reacting to the words, we might not really be communicating.
Okay, which leads me to a quote from Tara Brach. Tara is a well-known Buddhist in the States. I think she got a PhD in psychology, which is also gives... Can I just read that quote from her? She said, "We might be in the middle of an argument with our partner, and instead of saying the next thing to prove our point, we pause. In that pause, we can allow ourselves to contact the insecurity or hurt that lies under our defensiveness, which in turn may open the door to honest communication and more mutual understanding." And I'm wondering whether, how difficult, because of our social conditioning, we've become a bit, I believe we've become a bit disembodied and moved up into our rational mind a lot. And has that then prevented us, or do we struggle a little bit with getting the gist of that non-verbal stuff that our partners might be really good with?
It's a big statement that you're making there. Is that what's really happening? Could it be? When you talk about those statistics earlier, it's very important that when we consider the way we interpret what people are saying, that research was intended to consider context as well as body language and the content of speech and all of that. So context is a big driver for how we understand things. For example, I'm having a discussion with you. You start to fold your arms. Maybe, if I'm focused on your body language, that tells me, shit, Mark's getting a bit defensive here. What's going on? On the other hand, we might be outside and it's windy and cold, and you're just trying to keep yourself warm. So that there's those contextual things. If, as you're wondering, we're beginning to perhaps focus on the content of speech and miss the non-verbal stuff, another context is coming to mind for me, and that's the impact of social media.
Okay, how does that, where are you going with that? Can you just elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, so look, as the uptake of social media has increased, what we see on social media so often is polarisation. People becoming entrenched in their camps and fighting to be right and to be heard. Once we get onto social media, context begins to disappear. We lose a lot of that non-verbal stuff. Now, maybe I've gone on a tangent, and this is not right. But if we are habitually communicating on social media, and then perhaps transferring that way of communicating into our personal lives, could that be contributing to that trend that you're noticing?
I wonder if that trend, social media, at this stage in my life, I'm fairly, I'd hate to have grown up with it. I'd hate to have been a teenager in it, because so much bullying. We're hearing a lot of internet bullying that still continues in schoolyards.
Yep.
And I'm wondering whether it makes it easier to be bullied because of the different camps that you're talking about in social media. We're not able to see or experience the energy within the body language. Body language where I've got my arms crossed, the contextual, I am cold or I'm being defensive. But I'm wondering how much our bodies carry an energy with it, and how much energy, non-verbal energy, is communicated in our conversations, tone of voice, etc., etc.
I believe it's immense. I think those stats are probably fairly accurate.
And I'm wondering whether, I'm doing a lot of wondering tonight. But I'm wondering whether that really can be frustrating for men, because we've not, we're fairly rational and logical, and I call it, I've come up with a term called cerebral jousting in arguments with people. Well, it's like a cerebral jousting where we're not hearing, we're waiting to prove the point, as Tara Brach says. We're not actually stopping to pause. And in that non-verbal communication, I'm wondering whether we men get very, very frustrated that we're just not getting it, and it's not coming out right. We haven't. I'm just doing non-verbal communication to some of this.
Good. That was a planned demonstration, wasn't it, Mark?
Really well planned. Please don't do the dishes. It's like it'll go clank, clank, clank through the. There's a really non-verbal, an alarmist right there. How much energy was in that?
That was gold.
How much energy did you see in that?
Yeah, there's a lot there. Yep.
Now, how can that? And I wonder whether.
I'll just say something there.
Yeah, please.
And that was overt. It was an overt example of non-verbal communication.
Okay.
You were wanting the non-verbal to be read, and
yes.
Yeah. There's a good example. You've. Yeah. Whereas. Whereas a lot of the time we're talking about micro expressions, fleeting shifts in expression, and subtle changes of tone, which we recognise, I think, just below the rational level. The brain's processing it. The brain's fast, and it's aware, it's alert, it's picking things up, but quickly, and so that means it's going straight into our feeling systems, our emotional systems.
Yeah.
And this is, I wonder where that split might be occurring, because we're not reading our feelings and listening to them.
My feelings in there were that overt non-verbal communication. If I was to pause and connect to the feelings that were underneath that, was accessing what the reaction in that non-verbal was. Underneath that was the fear, anxiety and fear about the noise impacting on the conversation and being Facebook Live. That's the underlying for us to really pause, and that's where that was coming from. Hence the reaction. Now, I'm wondering for men whether a lot of our frustration in communication comes from our inability, or I don't want to be too generalistic with that, but is there an inability to connect to the non-verbal communication, to connect to the energies that are going on, the feelings that are going on underneath the intellectual, cognitive, verbal communication?
Okay, so are we incapable? Absolutely not. I reckon we're very sensitive. We're very capable. I believe other factors are at work. Socialization being one of them. When we argue, are we arguing to understand, to be understood, or to win?
And that's the cerebral jousting.
Yeah, that's it, being right.
And if you're right, do I then internalize that I'm therefore wrong?
I don't know.
Or have the potential to internalize, therefore, if you're right, therefore I'm wrong.
Yeah, quite possibly. And I keep going.
Yeah, and then could I have a reaction to an emotional reaction to my interpretation that I'm wrong, that's triggering my shame, my sense of inadequacies, my childhood, if I've had a childhood history of, Vicky's just asked, sorry, Vicky, I'm going to have to put my goggles on to read, but just, what does wrong mean? What does being wrong mean, I wonder? Asked Vicky Newman, one of our ATEP dear members. What does wrong? Go for it.
I think in this context, Mark, being wrong sounds like losing the cerebral joust.
Yeah, and do we like losing?
No, we don't like losing.
No, we don't.
However, winning in that context sounds like a hollow victory, doesn't it? And I reckon it's often felt that way. Winning those arguments is often somewhat unsatisfying. And then you've got the victor, the so-called victor, feeling, okay, I'm vindicated, I'm right, I've won the argument. Something still doesn't feel quite right here, because how can it? Connection hasn't happened and nothing's been resolved. And the other person is, possibly, as you say, experiencing shame, some anger, some resentment, and you're looking at polarization, which is going to increase.
And like when we're, I've used that, who won the grand final? Men will sometimes in hotels or in a social setting, they might start having an argument over who won the grand final in 1980.
Yes.
Now, fortunately now we can ask Dr. Google and get the right answer. But sometimes men can lose the plot over being right in an argument.
Absolutely.
Whether Richmond won it or Collingwood won it, does it really matter? And where's that sense in men that they, do they always need to be right? And how do we let that stuff go? Who cares whether that team won or not? Does it matter?
I guess it's about what's at stake and what's being protected. What's being protected. So what's at stake for me if I argue with you over who won the 1980 grand final? and it turns out I'm wrong.
Okay.
It seems okay on the surface. It seems like not much. It's not a big deal. Who cares? Richmond, Collingwood. Just out of interest, Mark, did you pull those teams out of the air, or?
I actually remember that grand final, and I think Richmond
Okay.
won.
Okay.
Yeah, 1980. There's a long time between. There's a long time between drinks, mate.
That is. I'll have
Yeah.
to take your word for it there.
I think. Yeah. Again, but it's how much do we invest in? Yeah.
Yes.
Again, I don't know. I'm just hope. Yeah. But it's how much how much do we men invest in, at that cerebral level that we need to be right?
Well, if my sense of self as being worthwhile and valuable as a man is resting upon, that I must be competent, capable, knowledgeable, and right about things, then my sense of masculinity, my sense of who I am as a man, is at risk in that moment. I thought I was right. I was certain I was right.
Yeah.
It seems a small thing when we look at it, in this context, but it's what's looking for the word here. What's invested? What's wrapped up in being right? And I wonder too, have you heard the term mansplaining?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you don't know that one?
Say it.
Yeah.
Mansplaining.
Mansplaining. Yeah. It's
okay.
It's a thing that we all need to know about, and I think it's connected to this. So mansplaining is the tendency of men in a work situation or elsewhere to explain things, often to women, but it can be to other men, but it's primarily talked about by women as an issue. This is where men explain things, that are obvious, that the woman would already have knowledge of. She doesn't need to be told about that. She doesn't need it explained to her at length. But she's got to sit there while some bloke, tells her about, I don't know, how the refrigerator works, or I don't know, how the solar system functions, or maybe you're in a work meeting, you're explaining Maslow's hierarchy, and the woman's sitting there going, for the love of God, I wish that bloke would shut up and stop mansplaining. Everybody knows about Maslow, whatever it might be.
Okay. Yeah. So mansplaining, and I wonder whether just doing it to avoid the discomfort of the non-verbal space that's sitting there. If I just shut up and don't, oh my God, I'm in discomfort, internally I'm in discomfort in this silence, so therefore I need to mansplain to fill up the void.
Fill up the void and perhaps demonstrate some competency, some skills, some knowledge, but pointlessly.
Oh, Jesus. And what's underneath that, at a feeling, at that non-verbal level that that men are not connecting to?
Yes, if we hop down, if we peel back a few layers, is there an insecurity there? Fear of not being good enough, a need to be recognised, a need for validation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's my guess.
And if I'm sitting there in that in silence, how much discomfort, that deadly silence. I'm sounding around like a, really, it can be an excruciating feeling, just standing there being, not necessarily invisible, but the old mind scratching itself. And there is, I've experienced that sense of discomfort. I think I remember trying to muck around with this Facebook, and man, it wasn't working. I'm sitting there going, "Dude, oh God."
Where's your technological know-how, Mark?
Well, yeah, exactly. I think I sort of joked it off and said, "Oh, this silly old what," well, which is a bit true. I'm joking, but
yeah,
it was, that really uncomfortable. Oh my God, I'm really feeling exposed here because this ain't working, and I'm sitting there, not that Tim is watching, but oh shit, I felt really exposed,
yeah,
and that sense of inadequacy. It's not going to kill me, but it was definitely there. And I really noticed it. And I'm wondering whether that triggers for me and other men a sense of inadequacy. And is that say it again, mansplaining?
Mansplaining.
Mansplaining. Is that
a manifestation of that?
A manifestation of that, and an avoidance of sitting with the discomfort of some underlying anxiety, some underlying insecurity. And that's where I wonder whether in conversations with our intimate partners, whether we miss, because we're so much ready to look at, for the next point to prove, I'm going to trump card you to be right. Are we missing a lot of connection? Are we missing a lot of the energetic, non-verbal nuances on what our partners are trying to get across to us? It's like, I'd hate to admit this, but we've been watching that Paradise thing, Bachelor in Paradise or something, and one of the boys...
is that a Married at First Sight kind of show?
It's a type of reality show, but one of the guys was besotted, lusting after one of the, 25-year-old on the show, and just would not take her non-body, her non-verbal language, just kept hoping that, and took so many miscues. It was just incredible how he just miscued this stuff, and it was really inappropriate behaviour, quite controlling behaviour, intimidating behaviour, and he just couldn't read it, the situation. The girl did not want to be, enjoyed him as a friend, but did not want to go further in this paradise thing. And he totally go on.
Yeah, let's look at this, because I reckon this is a situation that probably plays itself out on a Friday and Saturday night in pubs and clubs all around the country.
And how many women are intimidated by it as it's being played out?
Yeah, and then what I wonder is the bloke not reading the body language, or is the bloke operating off a different script which says, well, she said no, but that's really a challenge and I need to demonstrate that I'm serious and win her over. The damsel in distress, knight in shining armour type paradigm.
I can't, from what I observed on this show, was...
You're speculating.
I'm speculating it, but his behaviour was really not appropriate. Jealousy is a normal... we can all react with jealousy out of fear of loss. He was very jealous because he did, but his reactionary behaviour was borderline, really. Yeah, and I'm surprised the show kept him. He didn't obviously get a rose. He didn't get a rose, which meant he had to leave. But I would have thought that the producers would have come in a little bit earlier and said, "Hey, temper your behaviour down. You're intimidating. There's power and control issues here, etc., etc." And yeah, he just didn't want to pick up on that non-verbal. She was just not into him, and he probably deep down was feeling a sense of rejection. And that, yeah, for all of us, rejection can hurt. And it's how do we learn to get in touch with those deeper, emotions that can go with our non-verbal, that are associated with non-verbal communication. I don't know. It's another it's a fascinating conversation. How do we men improve in that area?
If we go back earlier in the conversation, you raised the question: are men capable of recognising that non-verbal communication?
Yeah.
And yes, we are. We can definitely do it.
So we can. Can I just clarify that again? Say it again. We can pick it up.
Absolutely, of course we can, and we can feel it.
So we can. Can we interpret that feeling? Perhaps.
Yeah. Are we capable of interpreting that feeling?
That's right. Are we capable of interpreting that feeling and sitting with that feeling and owning that emotional state?
Yeah. I'd say, hell yeah, we're definitely capable. Are men doing it? Seems like a lot of us are not doing it. And that's a problem. Why are we not doing it? Because we've been raised to not be comfortable with our feelings. Maybe we've been raised in such a way that makes it uncomfortable when we don't get what we want. Because that bloke sounded like he wasn't getting what he wanted. And as you were sort of guessing, and we're just guessing, because we don't know him.
Yeah.
Surely he must have felt something. Whether it was
he was displaying quite a lot of anger and felt betrayed by his alleged, mates that've only been in this place for a week or 2 weeks. And was feeling, feeling betrayed. In some of the language he was using, calling them dogs for doing, stepping on his territorial turf or something to that effect, and which I think is probably very traditional, old patriarchal social conditioning stuff that I think we really do need to start challenging a little bit, and I think it is starting to be challenged.
I'm with you on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering whether a lot of that, that sort of ownership, and the girl complained that she did feel controlled. She did feel, he doesn't own me, and he, part of that old patriarchy. Go back to the 18th century, children were chatels. Was it chatels? It's CHATTEL.
I've seen it written. I've never had to say it.
Well, it's their I think something like that. And it's really interesting. There's a quote that I want to read you by. I don't know whether I read it before. I can't remember. By Albert Einstein. I was really shocked when I read this one that. The non-verbal stuff is the intuitive, I would describe it as the intuitive mind, the ability to intuit what we're actually feeling. And Albert Einstein was alleged to have said it. There's some discussion that he may not have said it. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honours the servant and has forgotten the gift. And I'm wondering, this is part of why I'd like you and I to have these conversations and invite others into the mix. Is how do we men, start to make changes to that intuitive, a lot of that deeper stuff, so we can actually pause in our arguments instead of going into the old cerebral jousting with each other. Just pick up on the non-verbal vibes, pick up on the energy, what's really going on underneath here, what is my insecurity when I'm not, when we move it into that cerebral jousting, the arguments, when we're all going to argue, there's guidelines to fair fighting, but How do we stop and listen and hear deeply what's going on for the other person, what's going on for our partners, what's going on for ourselves at a deeper level? And hopefully, we can display some of that. Well, unintentionally did display some of it tonight. It's there, and really, the universe was providing me with that one, which is really good. And I don't. Yeah, it's okay to expose our own stuff and be okay with exposing that. Anything else around, just mindful of time and should we pursue this again next week with looking at some of the deeper aspects to, how do we connect to the energy that's going on inside ourselves, that, what are those underlying, what are some of those insecurities? What might they be?
I'm reflecting on the Einstein quote.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Look out, the video's
You're
going to come back on.
Getting the wind up.
I'm getting the wind up. Yeah.
Okay. Is it Game of Thrones tonight?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry. Quick. Just.
So what I think you're calling for, Mark, or what I'm hearing there's a need for, is a radical redefinition of what we consider to be masculine behaviours. So we need to redefine masculinity. Women are redefining femininity, and we're being called to do the same.
And are we going? Are we being dragged into it, or I would hope, are we being dragged into it, or can we really embrace the change and move forward in this sort of work?
Let's see it as an open door.
All right.
That we can step through.
Good.
Yeah, but no, I think it's a good starting point for next week.
All right, mate.
And let's keep doing it.
Yeah, no, let's keep doing it. Let's keep having the conversations, and hopefully, we can get a few comments and a bit of feedback, and
Yep, be great to have a few questions.
It doesn't matter what, and it doesn't matter what sort of feedback. Let's if people want to challenge it, that's great. Let's have the dialogue. Let's have an open conversation about what it is and what it means to rewrite this or redefine the masculinity.
Yeah.
All right, mate.
All right.
Nice talking to you. Namaste.
Namaste. Good to see you.
Cheers, mate. Great conversation. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
Cheers.